Good morning. My name is Heidi Hadsel, and I am substituting for Patriarchate, who was unable to come from Bangkok because her work is in conflict transformation, and there's a lot of conflict right now in Bangkok, and she decided really at the last moment that it was better for her to stay there and act rather than to come here and speak, and we miss her very much, but understand why she's not here. I am from the United States, as you can tell from my accent, and I'm the president of a seminary, which is a graduate school that's of Christian origins that specializes in relationships primarily between Muslims and Christians. It's been doing this work for 100 years, and Muslim Christians and Jews, and then further Muslims, Christians, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, and so forth as well. And so an interfaith seminary that very strongly believes that religious leadership today needs to be leadership that understands and knows each other across our religious traditions. And so it's a pleasure for me to be here as a substitute to come on in, to think with you about values and the principles that we have looked at yesterday and will be looking at together today from various religious perspectives. And we have our panelists here. Panelists, will you raise your hand, because we're in a kind of a democratic circle here. We have a panelist here, a panelist here, a panelist here, and a panelist here, correct? That's right. Okay. And what we've been asked, what they have been asked to do is to talk about various elements of religion and religious values and human rights and so forth. So I am going to ask Sanjoy, oh, excuse me, okay, to go first. And I will ask each of you to speak about 10 minutes. And I'm going to try to be firm about that. You've come prepared with presentations for about 10 minutes so that we have time for you to talk to each other and for everyone in the room to join in the conversation. Okay? Okay? Do you all follow me? Am I speaking too quickly? My students in the United States accuse me of speaking too quickly.
Not yet.
So, not yet? Not yet. Okay. So, please say.
Before we begin, any particular question that you want us to address, or a general presentation?
Your presentation that you've been asked to do, the religious perspectives on equality. Because in this conversation here, we have people who are coming at the issue of equality in an unequal world from a business perspective, some coming at it from a secular human rights perspective, and some coming at it from a religious perspective. So here today this morning is one opportunity that we have to reflect together from different religious perspectives on the question of equality and the religious contribution to the conversation about and the value of equality, the religious understanding of that from different religious perspectives. So that's what I invite you to concentrate on in your opening presentation, okay? And I would ask you to say a few words about yourself. We have the biography, but just say a few words about yourself before you begin.
Well, very good morning to all of you friends from all parts of the world. I belong to India. I was brought up in a city, the eastern part of the country called Calcutta. And briefly, my background is of engineering, then MBA from IIM, Bachelor's IIM. We are now in Calcutta. and Calcutta. I studied there. Then I was a faculty member of IIM Calcutta for 16 years, working on human values in management from, I think, spiritual perspectives for 16 years. And from 2009 onwards, I have joined another IIM, new one, which is up in the hills of Shillong in the northeast of this country. There are 7 states in the northeast of India. One of them is Meghalaya. Shillong is the capital of Meghalaya. It's called the Scotland of the East because of its beauty. So I've been dabbling with issues like ethics, values, spirituality in the field of management, in education, and also in practice since the last 20 years. That's briefly more.
Thank you, that's nice, that's very helpful. Please continue.
When Christoph had a conversation with me, because he was here in IIM Shillong last March for the conference on sustainability, he floated the idea that I should speak from a Hindu point of view. And I said there is nothing called a Hindu point of view. The word Hindu does not appear in any Indian classical text as known. It is a coinage which was given later by mainly people who wanted to understand India from outside. So I would say classical Indian instead of Indian. Classical Indian origin. The texts which I would primarily refer to are a body of texts which are called Upanishads. Upanishads, which is a conversation between a teacher and students. That is the mode of the transmission or dissemination of knowledge. I will just mention a few cardinal concepts around equality and inequality. Because the questions were asked to us, I'm sure we've received, what are the sources of this inequality? Where are we going wrong? And how can we rectify it from a religious mutual point of view? So the Upanishads talk about primarily the core of the human being, the essence, the self. That is a starting point. And at that core, all human beings under the sun are equal. Whatever the backgrounds may be, religion, caste, creed, country, culture. At the core, only at the core. If we are looking for equality at the other apparent dimensions like the physical dimension, the mental orientations, the opinions, the intellectual positions, in all these we find the variations. In these variations, if we are looking for all-round equality, then we will be misled and we won't be able to enjoy the diversity. So if we are really want to enjoy the diversity, enjoy the harmony in human existence and relationships, and that includes the ecosystem, then we have to anchor our consciousness into the core of the human being, which is the essence of the self. The starting point is the self. The next question is how. The how part is answered very intelligently in the Upanishads. The very first Upanishad known to us, called the Isho Upanishad, which is about the all-pervading consciousness. There, it says that you have to first expand yourself. Don't try to be unselfish. The Upanishads do not tell you to be unselfish because that strikes at the very root of your existence, yourself. We all start from the self. What you can do, you expand the self so that at some point in time, in that process of expansion, yourself becomes the universe. It first includes the people around you, then your family, then your society. Gradually, progressively, it includes the country, goes beyond the continent, the planet, the cosmos, and there it becomes one with the universe. That is the way. Expand the self in terms of progressive evolution of the consciousness to reach out to the universe. So, when I find that someone is hurt from a different country, from a different culture, who's getting hurt? I'm getting hurt. Because my consciousness has partly permeated into that individual or that particular group of people. Not because they're different. that is also reflected in the Bible, where the dictum goes as, love thy neighbor as thyself. Before that, you have to experience the neighbor as yourself in terms of consciousness, and then you love the neighbor as thyself. The next point I would like to mention here is there's often a very, very go wrong. First, we go wrong, we are looking for equality in the zones of differences, where we will be differing. Yesterday, the smart comment which was made by Klaus, that we are born different. Some are good and some are something else. So that will be there. If we are looking for similarities or equality in the domain of body, mind, intellect, intellectual positions, mental orientations, likes, dislikes, then belief systems, then we will be heading for trouble. But if you focus on the core, the self, then accept that as the fundamental stratum of equality, then from there you can enjoy the differences as a diverse manifestation. This is the first cardinal point. The other point I would like to mention here is often this dichotomy between the matter and the spirit in the discourse. There also, the Upanishads come very clear. The very first Upanishad again, it states clearly that if you pursue matter to the exclusion of spirit, then your life will end up in darkness. One. The second statement, if you pursue spirituality, to the exclusion of matter, then your life will end up in deeper darkness. The priorities are clear. First, build the material foundation. On the basis of that, you build your superstructure of spirituality. And the next verse says, we are talking about harmony yesterday so much. There should be a harmonious pursuit of both the material dimension and the spiritual dimension of life, of aspirations, of human aspirations, together, simultaneously, not either or, but both, if you want a life of fulfillment. We often miss out on that. Often India is represented as a country, the culture which is, outward, which is completely otherworldly. It doesn't look at material things like that. The Upanishads, the core texts, never talk about that. The other point I would like to mention here, yesterday we were talking about duty and rights, human rights you mentioned. Now, we were also emphasizing on the importance of duty orientation in our discourses yesterday. But here, in another Upanishad, there's a beautiful scheme. It's a holistic scheme of 5 levels. 5 levels of human existence. Not human existence, cosmic existence rather. It starts from the plants at the lowest level, plants and animals, and goes up to the forces of nature, sun, air. In between come the human being, it will come your sages and seers, the teachers, the parents, all this are covered in the same scheme. Now, the way we have been asked to deal with this network of relationship is feel a debt orientation. You are indebted to them. On the day I am born, I get the sunlight without asking for it. On the day I am born, I drink the water without asking for it. So my orientation towards them, these forces of nature, as I live my life, is a kind of paying back as far as possible through somewhere ceremonies, somewhere through a ritual, somewhere just a homage to these forces. Likewise to other human beings. Like the food I take. The food I take, so many people have contributed towards making this a food for me. Do I remember that when I have my food? So a debt orientation, I'm not going into the details, debt orientation to all the teachers from whom you have learned. Debt orientation implies a duty that I need to repay it as far as possible. You cannot square it, but you will try in your behavior, in your mental attitude, you can try to repay it. And the last point I would like to mention before I close, this is called actually service in the classical Indian sense. Service. In today's notion of service, like in service industry, if I offer a service and you receive the service, then you are the beneficiary and I am the benefactor. But from this debt orientation model of the Upanishads, the notion of service that we arrive at is that if I offer that service, then the primary beneficiary of that act of serving is myself, because you have given me an opportunity to serve and square up that debt which I owe to the entire humanity at large. How does it reflect? There's a very well-known spiritual institution created in India in 1898, still thriving, the Ramakrishna Mission, founded by one of the leading figures of Indian spirituality, Swami Vivekananda. I'm not going into that. The motto of the institution, I will end with this, says, for the liberation of the self, comma, and for the welfare of the world. Simultaneously, not either or. And the liberation of the self is the personal journey of expansion of self-consciousness. And the welfare of the world is that spirit of that service which you offer, for which you are the prime beneficiary. And the world is giving an opportunity to serve. I'll stop.
Thank you. What a wonderful summary. Wonderful beginning to our conversation. And I imagine there are a number of other Hindus in the room. And I use that word because that's the common word we use. I understand that Hindu is a word that the West has put on India. But I imagine there are a number of others in the room, and you will have a chance to join in the discussion as we move forward. But first, I think we'll hear from the perspectives of the speakers that have come prepared to do just what you've done here. And our next speaker comes from China. And would you like to introduce yourself and tell us who you are, and you're speaking from a Christian perspective. Please, fellow board member of Global Ethics Net.
Yeah, in China, if I speak, I will stand up. So firstly, I'm very honored to stand here. Say good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And I want to introduce myself. I look very young, but not. I'm 14, not 14. So I'm a Christian background, but I'm not in the narrow church Christian. I'm the number of human being. I love the truth. I believe the truth will make us free. As in my mind, God is love. So I'm very, feel passionate with professor and his different background leaders. We can sharing our idea. So my position in China is a professor in university to teach the economy and the business ethics. And I also lead IT company, just like Infront in India, that is also go public in China. And my field focus on business ethics implement is, in my mind, is we all know the challenge of ethics, but how to practice, how to do that. So I want to introduce our team's experience, what we have done for that. So I also want to say my honored friends, Lucy and his wife, nice to meet you again, and Lucy, yeah, nice to meet you again, and my professor, thank you, see you again. So I want to sum up my topic is 4 parts. One part is one I want to sum up. We do ethical education is a program. Its name is ethical MBA. MBA is ethical MBA, which Beijing, the Professor Liu, the university. So we do that is a very interesting. It's a free education. It's promise education. Means the professor team, the cost is include me, the entrepreneurs will pay. Roughly within 4 years, we pay $1 million cost to education, educate 10,000 students until now. And they promise if after education they will do some charity for society, means to do the social responsibility business. So they do, we sum up, they do the $100 million donation for China society, not for us. They do everything. They do children, healthy care, it's a lot of different. So they do more than 12 team to focus on different social responsibility business. It's models. We push them, means we give them some very high quality education, but they promise after education they will do something for the world. This is the model. So the model is very interesting. So every year go to Switzerland. So this last year is Lindsay gave us a very wonderful speech also. So we want to make the education is to keep on, is never stop. So the students never stop. It's every month we have the class in the different cities of China. Until now, more than 10 cities have this kind of class. The class is free. We teach the business ethics. But firstly, we background the biblical value, but we do the common value. So now we do the common value-based enterprise certification system from this year with the global ethics. Because we think, the entrepreneurs, roughly they know what's the right things, how to do right, but it's selfish, maybe its benefit is very, attractive and make them missing. It's hard to do. So we set up the community and use the standard and investigate the different enterprise. What's your problem in ethics? And what's our standard? Do you agree our standard? We have more than 100 questions asked every field of business. Include performance, include human being, include the financial, include innovation, ethics, different fields. And they promise, yes, I want to do, but I pay tax enough now. I never corruption now. So the step by step, the different goal, and every 3 months, my team gave them auditor report to push them step by step to follow the ethical principle, step by step at once. So every year, they will give a year report, make them, I go ahead, I improve myself. So we find this certification system is very wonderful and very effective for the enterprise. This is practical. It's not only theories. It's not only education. It's make them just like a law system, but not official law. It's community law to make them understand. So we open the mind. It's Christian faith or other faith, not the individual, it's a society responsibility. So we emphasize not only the spiritual faith, but also we also push them to be the light of the world, to be the salt of the world. So this is our practice, experience. So from this year, we work with the Christoph and the Global Ethics. We set up a new center named the Center for Leadership and Business. It's Global Ethics Center for Leadership and Business. So this center focuses on it's just a summary. It's that we find is the crisis in the world is the crisis of ethics and values. So many people and the institutions are centered on economy and individual benefit. So we want to change that. So we do this kind of things to improve and support ethical decision making and responsibility of professionals in leading position in private, public, and religious institutions. Second, to deepen the ethical values of the participants. Three, to strengthen, mature, respect, sharing, and understanding, and strengthen persons for innovative and courage solutions. So we want to become an internationally recognized center for ethical basis and value-based leadership in business, public, and religious sectors. So we do 5 fields. It's first the research project, the second international cooperation, and third is quality to do the implement ethics. So the fourth also includes today's debate. So the last bit, we do the online education to make our model to vital. So until now, we have some very good partner. Include the Indian International Rich Institute of Relative Economies. Is India is our partner, and also SEES, and also World Enterprise and else. So we work together to build up a new ethical world in the business team, because the business leader now is the center of the world. If the business leader change the value and ethics, the world will change better. So we want to say values, common values create value. It's our topic. So we want to work together to understand what's the common value and how to implement the values in the practice. It's our team's work. So we get a lot of positive results. And we also face a lot of challenge and problem. So today, I also want to ask and I also learn so much here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let me just, you are doing wonderful work in China with others in an interreligious way, focusing on ethics and business.
Yeah.
The people from other religious traditions will, as our friend here has just done, they will be motivated by their own religious values and religious tradition to engage in this work.
Right.
So since we're really focusing in this panel on our religious motivations and thoughts, can you reflect just for a minute or so on how your own religious tradition has led you into this work?
So, it's a good question. Thank you. So, because in my heart, God gave me the work is glory to God and benefit for the human being. So I think it's if for ourselves, we cannot do these kind of things because every year I pay $1 million and get nothing in benefit. But fortunately, I find that the people change. They do a lot of responsibility for the world. I think that this is my mind in the Bible teaching. So we love you, you love world. This transfer love. So this principle I learned from Bible. This is the heart in God. So I think this is my God teach me to love others, to do something. And I also want to say, not to can say I do very honest means donation. No, we cannot say donation. I just paid that because as God gave us everything. My business, myself belong my God. This is my heart. So in my mind is I will pay back, not donate because I have nothing. So I pay back. So I persuade my students, don't say you are a hero, you donate the world. No, you have nothing. You will pay back. You will responsibility back. So we pay back. We should discuss how to pay back, how to do that, not how to donate. No, donate means you are a hero, maybe. So we pay back. We have a debtor. So it's the heart we have sinners. We do wrong things, so we back. So my students understand. Oh yes, I have to do that. Not I should do. I have to do. I must do. This is my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, that's very good. Thank you very much. And we'll have more time to ask questions and discuss. But first, we're going to go to our friend from the Russian Orthodox Church, and who has a translator with him. So we'll take a few more
I need
minutes.
to go to corner for my presentation show.
Or is it a
My name is Evgeni, I speak about, я буду говорить о православном отношении и к бедности, и к обеспеченности, и то, как с этим работают в церкви.
Let's speak about the Orthodox. Let's look about the way in Orthodox they treat poor people and rich people.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to greet you here in this land that was once blessed by Saint Thomas the Apostle. Those who are closely involved in business and finance. We all know that the current financial crisis has made some investors, interpreters and rich people revise their previous practices. Now the question is, what kind of conclusion could a Christian church and an individual Christian derive from the crisis? Some of you might be surprised to find out that the Bible says nothing about economic equality. The scripture elaborates of gender equality, on equal opportunities to work and labor, on equal opportunities for everyone, regardless of their nationality or social position, to confess their faith in Jesus Christ, who says that one's life does not consist of positions. Neither does the Bible set any limits to wealth and prosperity. Whom do we consider as being rich? Someone who owns a plot of land and a horse, or someone who owns a private plane and house in Manhattan. Different epochs used different criteria. As for ourselves, we hardly have any guidelines to define absolutely prosperity or total misery. Affluence and greed know no limits. A person obsessed by gaining never stops wanting more. However, a wider public finds it increasingly difficult to take in the simple truth, and this is where we run into a major problem. What do we need to do to remind our businesses and decision makers and their bear responsibility for their decisions? A Christian church, and I'm referring mostly to the Orthodox Church now, is hardly a judge whose ultimate goal is to issue a verdict on every case of economic offense. Rather, the presence of the church in everyday life, reminding people of Christian moral standards, might prevent the transgression it actually denotes as sin. Another important point is that the church is not supposed to prefer the rich to the poor, just as the poor in the church are not supposed to feel more privileged than the rich. The church is a place of common prayer, open to all and make all those who come here to pray equal. It is a place where a billionaire might find himself standing next to a beggar who can hardly buy himself food for supper. Hence, here is another formidable task the church is facing now: how to make both the rich man and the beggar live like good Christians should, in mutual respect and consideration. What do we need to do so that the wolf shall live with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down and with the kid, and calf and the lion or the fatling together, and the little child shall lead them? Global economic problems are partly caused by some of the Christian giving up of rejection Christian principles to serve money and wealth. These people come to believe that money and not God gives you power in this world. Wealth sometimes gives its owner an irrational feeling of confidence. A person like that believes that his powers are boundless and that he should do everything to gain more. I recall my encounter with a real estate agent, a former theological seminary student. The man has cheated on an elderly lady, leaving her without a home, and was trying to convince me there is no honest way of running we can only regret that an accomplished theological education did him no good. The church where I'm serving is located in one of the most expensive areas in Moscow. That gives me a fair idea of the life of the local people. I recall an episode when a billionaire was telling his little daughter that her aunt was bad because she was poor. He said, there is nothing she can give you, and God has not blessed her with wealth. The little daughter answered, I know she is poor, but I still love her. and misguided individuals, economic mismanagement on a global scale, financial crimes, and erratic family education have produced what we now term as a crisis. And here I'd like to quote His Holiness the Patriarch Kirill of Moscow and of Russia. He said, "One of the meaning of the Greek word crisis is judgment. Hence, from the Christian point of view, the current economic turmoil could well be interpreted as a judgment of our social life. And yet, and God still gives us a chance to learn from our errors and correct our ways." The Primate of the Russian Church keeps saying that the global economic crisis was originated from a personality crisis and uncontrolled and a desire to make more money by all means possible, has produced an available economic model based on a speculative financial mechanism. That is the most dangerous growth pattern, creating much of the wealth of our thin air. The Patriarch recalled meeting a group of wealthy individuals who pledged on having made $20 million is just a week's time by simply speculating on the stock exchange. But these $20 million are supposed to be secured by real values, which is simply impossible if is that case. So the Patriarch concluded, "I think our economic system needs to be fixed. And now I propose we should take a look into history. I'd like to tell you about Saint Joseph Wolodzki. He was marked by a great strength of spirit, courage, strong faith, and unbending will. He lived in the difficult period at the turn of the 15th centuries when a unified Russian state was formed. These times also saw the rise of the Russian Orthodox Church and the build-up of the Russian influence in Europe. Saint Joseph Wolodzki believed that the church constitute a perfect instrument of the redistributions of wealth, being in a good position to accept the wealth from the rich and give it over to those in need. Some of the Russian saints used to be rich. Saint Basil of Pavlov Posad was co-owner of a show producing factory. He used to spend his money on helping the poor and building schools and houses for the homeless and helpless, investing into religious education. Saint Seraphim of Vyritsa, he became a monk, owned a large factory, exporting a good share on his produce to countries like Germany, Austria, Great Britain, or France. These days, the Russian Orthodox Church has taken to reminding businesses of its moral obligation. Back in 2004, of the initiative from our church, the World Russian People Congress adopted the Code of Moral Rules and Principles for communities. The quote has been later supported by all religious communities across Russia. And 5 years later, in 2009, an expert council, economics and ethics, was created under the auspices of the Patriarch of Moscow and for Russia. Its goal is to carry out ethical assessment of economic practices in Russia and in the global arena, searching of efficient economic solution and based of the Orthodox Christian more and values. Our church keep reminding of people of the principles formulated by St. Paul who wrote, those who want to be rich fall into a temptation and are trapped by many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and for the love of money as a root of all kinds of evil and in their eagerness to be rich. Some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pains. However, and it's quite unfortunate too, and these days and over the majority of people and the developed and developing countries stick to be so-called consumer society. This model is hardly as new as it seems. Remember the Roman Empire with its people craving bread and circuses. No money can satisfy individual demands, which are often stretched beyond all reasonable limits. We have all kinds of cases when top managers of bankrupt and businesses commit suicide. If we took and it through the prism of Christian ethics, this is a logical outcome produced by the mix of greed, lies, and arrogance. Please finish that. The church needs to use its means, mostly praying and preaching, to support people in these dire times and giving them hope and faith and the providence for each and every people, every person.
Thank you
Okay,
very
thank you
much.
very much.
Thank you very much. So we've just had two different Christian perspectives. And Moses here emphasized service to others from the Christian tradition as a duty and not something to be rewarded. And our Orthodox friend here has emphasized the one strand of Christian thought, which is that inequality, in the sense of some economic inequality, is often caused by individual human greed, individual human sin and greed, and the analysis of the Russian church that way. So we can come back to those themes, but first we're going to take the time for a Buddhist perspective on equality. And please introduce yourself. And speak up.
Sankarnarayan. I'm from the Postgraduate Research Institute of Buddhist Studies from Bombay. Our institute has been engaged in teaching Buddhist ethics from the literature, Buddhist philosophy as a practical philosophy, Buddhist religion as a way of life for everyone. I'm focusing now here with reference to spirituality for sustainability. Sankarnarayan Ujitasmi Mahapati Padume Tatta Jayeta Sichigandam Manora. I recite this particular verse from Dhammapada, one of the spiritual scriptures of Buddhism, which speaks about though lotus is born in the mud, it retains its beauty and luster, and spreads its fragrance. It should be the same for an individual to retain the moral behavior in spite of the chaos outside. If I say Buddha was the vanguard of globalization, it is not an exaggeration. What Buddha experienced and shared more than 2,500 years back is still valid and relevant in the present day. The spiritual breath which he breathed is more vital than ever in the present. The spirituality in Buddhist perspective is purity. It is the purity of thought, it is the purity of speech, it is the purity of action. Of late we have been talking much about the economic crisis, environmental crisis, global warming. For all these things, Buddha, what he learned and shared with the degradation of the moral, ethical character of an individual, which reflects on the society is part of the nation is part of the globalization. That is so it comes from an individual, the individual character where it has to be given importance. According to Buddha, there are 3 unwholesome actions which are responsible for the degradation of the ethical character. The first, it is raga, that is the greediness. The second, he specifies that it is dosa or dvesha, that is enmity. The third, it is the delusion, that is moha. All these 3 qualities are the enemies within self and which reflects outside. The inner peace is affected, then the outer peace is equally affected. In this context, the ethical behavior, the ethical conduct which has been specified, for which what was the issues at the time of Buddha is still the same in the present day world, that is the social issues. The caste system, the gender issues, religious practices, leadership, whether it is for the political leadership or religious leadership. In all these things, the ethical character has been of playing the great role in it. When he speaks of these issues, he has given the values too. From his own experience, he never told that these are all my teachings, you come and learn. Whenever the questions have been raised, he has already spoken about Upanishad, where it is the dialogue between the teacher and the taught. Here it is more to do with the common man raising the issues for which he gave the way. Hence, Buddha is also known as Tathagata, one who has shown the way. And you have to tread the path. You can tread the path the way that you can achieve, but the goal remains the same. When we use the word Buddha, it is not the Siddhartha Gautama Buddha alone we talk about. It is Buddha within everyone. Buddha means it is one who is awakened, one who had the awareness. So he had the awareness of what was the problem of that period and which is relevant even today. And that is how the caste system, when he emphasizes, of late we talk about the forward community, the backward community, which affect the society, which affect the educational field, which affect the economic background. Yesterday we have been watching the people who have been considered as a tribe, who have not been given the equal status in the society. For all these things, it is the caste system which has played the vital role, for which Buddha has emphasized. The low and high doesn't depend on the birth. It is to be attained through knowledge, the skill and moral behavior, for which he has given the values, with reference to the social values, where it starts from an individual to the family to the society. So within the family, the parents and the children, and how the parents should handle the children, and how the children should learn to respect the parents. And within the household, we have the servant, and how the master should treat the servant, and how the servant should look up to the master in the performance of the duty. It is the same with reference to the gender system, gender issues, where Buddha has proved any gender in the society has got the right to achieve that goal. He has admitted the daughters of the scavenger, the daughters of the robbers into the Sangha to prove that the equality is within the people among the people within the society. When he talks about the royal issues, he taught how the leader has to lead the community. This is how he has been giving the social value, and for which he has given the concept with reference to antidote of anger, to go much deeper into oneself through compassion. It is the universal compassion. When we talk of Buddhism as a religion, the way of life, the experiential knowledge of Buddha which has been shared. So each one, he said that even how much over we describe the sweetness of sugar, it cannot be described. It has to be experienced. In the same way, whatever amount of teaching that we can give, unless it is experienced, it cannot be implemented. That is how he emphasized on the Bhavanamayi Prajna, in the sense it is the experiential knowledge, where it starts with the Chintamayi, that is Shrutimayi Prajna. Whatever you have been told, we read the scriptures, the Bibles or the Upanishads, and then we have to contemplate on the same. That is Chintamayi. Analytically, logically analyze, then you accept the same as your experiential knowledge. This is how he emphasizes the concept of experience to understand the morality. When we talk about sustainability, it is the greediness, tanha or raga, which becomes the vital cause for whatever is happening outside. We take more than what we give back to the world, to the earth, to the life, to each and every one. That is how he emphasizes the concept of sustainability. When he talks of sustainability, whether it is economic, whether it is ecology, in all these aspects, everything in the universe has its role. He talks about not the dogmas. Through the Jatakas, the birth stories, he explains the morality, the importance of animals, the importance of plants, and the interdependence. The core philosophy of Buddhism is known as interdependence or dependent origination. The living being has to depend on the plants, and the animals have to depend on the plants, and we depend on the animals. Animals in the sense that he has given the equality for all the living things in the universe. That is how he emphasizes the concept of Pratitya Sabodpada, that is, it is the interdependence, and he gives beautifully the story. In a necklace, when the gems are studded, the reflection of each gem reflects on each other. It is the same within the society also. Each one's moral, ethical behavior reflects on the other, and the other reflects on this, and the chaos starts. And for this we have to have the balance. When we have the inner peace, the inner balance, and that reflects on the outer peace and the outer balance. And this is how the ecology can be balanced, the sustainability can be there. And the other very important aspect, it is the concept of karma and rebirth. The man becomes the master of his future. There is no unseen power which blesses or give the provision to be escaped. The one who performs, he becomes the master of the future in the sense, if I perform something bad, I become responsible for my future. This is how the concept of karma theory has been explained, and he also emphasizes with the concept of jati, that is the birth, Jara the old age, and Marana. No individual can escape from these things. Instead of escaping, one should learn to face the things. One should have the ethical, moral behavior. That is how Buddhist philosophy is considered as a practical philosophy. Buddhist religion is known as the Shila Paraka Dhamma. It is the Dhamma in the sense of law of nature. It is in the sense of one's own duty. It also means with reference to the way of life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, very succinct, very well done. Okay, so we have a number of different perspectives here, and a number of commonalities that I see that run through these perspectives. I don't see anyone in our presentations that has not affirmed some kind of an essential equality among human beings. Then we've also talked about if human beings are somehow essentially equal, that doesn't mean they're empirically equal. One of the ways that we may be equal is in our own tendency towards greed and self-aggrandizement, which each of our religions tries to control, I think. So let's open it up. I don't know if you want to say something. You were emphasizing Buddhism as a kind of a critique of the caste system. I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that, or whether we just move on and open it up. Do any of our speakers want to say something to each other? Yeah.
Caste system, as we understand it, is an aberration of the original scheme which is called the Varna. The Varna was not based on discriminations. The Varna was founded on the uniqueness of the individual characteristics and giving and highlighting those characteristics and flowering it for those individuals or group of individuals. Later on, the degeneration happened when it was converted into caste and went into a discriminatory mode, to which the voice of protest came from first Lord Buddha. That is the historical perspective of this.
Thank you very much. Very much.
Can I
Yes.
respond? So when we talk about caste system, academically I am discussing this thing. When we emphasize on Upanishads, and to understand the supreme knowledge through Upanishads, it has been confined only to the two groups in the society at that time, even today. It is only for the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas. Never the Vaishyas or the Shudras, whom we talk about as the caste. When we talk about the difference in the caste, they have never been given the opportunity to reach to that goal of life, which every individual has the right to reach and to have the path. That is how the caste system has been eradicated during the time of Buddha, which is equally important, because of which Dr. Ambedkar also gave the platform for the low caste people who have been considered as the downtrodden. He has given them the platform now, which has become the part of the social life.
Okay, thank you. What I don't want to do is have the next 20 minutes focused on this discussion. It's an important discussion, but there are lots of other things that we're here to discuss. It's an important discussion in terms of equality, because the caste system seems to suggest that some people are born unequal, or people are born unequal, and you have affirmed another position. So let's just leave this discussion, if we might, and we can discuss it over a break, and think more broadly about what's been presented here, and what our religious traditions are bringing, both that is the same and some things that are different, are bringing towards the thinking of the kinds of principles that were laid out yesterday afternoon, that we're moving towards, or Globe Ethics is moving towards, and invites us to think about together and respond to together. And I don't have those principles with me. I forgot them. You've got them. But one is, would you introduce
Yeah,
those?
I would like to say five of
Yes,
them.
just a minute.
Five of them, sorry, four of them.
I think there's seven, aren't there? I think there's seven. That's sustainability. Were we supposed to be talking about sustainability? Or the moral principles of equality? Where are they? Discrimination is an expression of equality, as an expression of equality is a key human right and obligation. And we can also see in our presentations that our traditions, once they've affirmed a kind of an essential equality, then also struggle to think about, well, you know, how is it that we're unequal? And affirm, and they struggle to find out what it is in the human heart and human characteristics that lead towards a kind of inequality. Inequalities, social inequalities, and we've talked about in the presentation from the Russian church about the rich and the poor, or we talk about castes, or we talk about minorities of one kind or another, and so forth. And our traditions, our moral traditions, have to give an account of the inequality. If they've affirmed equality, they have to give an account of inequality and how it arises and what we are to do about it. What we are to do about it, as you suggest, is action. Action oriented towards, and I think you've all expressed this, the kind of a debt the human heart feels for life. For the Creator, for life, for the abundance of life, and so that one gives back as a rather joyful service and offering rather than paying off the debt, if you will. Equality means equal treatment of equals and unequal treatment of those who are not equal. That is, if we see the empirical inequality in the world, we don't try to make everybody the same. We try to treat ourselves, treat unequal cases unequally. That is, we have special needs and special situations. We're not all the same. Equality involves respect for diversity. Equality and freedom balance each other. Again, our religious traditions need to think about that, and they do think about that. How is it that the individual is free to develop and grow and be self-fulfilled, and at the same time responsible and living life in community and co-responsible with each other. And then societies with fewer, this is really not so much a principle but an observation, societies with fewer inequalities are more prosperous and have greater social peace. So I'm just saying those now. I'm going to let you say something. But what we want to do is come back and think together about these traditions that we've heard from and in the light of these principles. Okay? Does that sound like a good plan? Sir?
Yeah, some of the points mentioned in the proposed draft, I believe deserve certain nuances to be supplemented to justify which I'd like to make a few points. One is to fundamentally ask the root cause question, what makes a person ethical? Why a person should be behaving in an ethical manner? What are the motivating factors why a man should act in an ethical manner? It is by choice. If you have a choice, you have your consciousness, you have a conscience operating, and your own wisdom and intellect also driving you. These are the forces which drive you by choice to tell you what is right and what is wrong, and you choose the path of right. And you go by this by your own inner volition, you try to be an honest and an ethical person. That's one thing. Suppose you are not, then what are the other constraining factors which force you to become an ethical person? Then it's the other way out, the fear of law. Law tells you don't do it. So it's the fear of law which motivates a person to be ethical. Or the fear of social disapproval, social odium, the disapproval of your own community. That forces a man to be ethical. It's the second thing. Third thing is the fear of God, the fear of your faith. God is there watching you, and you're going to be punished eventually on one day. So this is another motivating factor which forces a man to remain ethical. Finally, the belief system of a different class. If you don't have faith in God and fear for God, you have the fear of consequences. That is where the Eastern philosophies of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism emphasize the fear of karma, the consequences of your action, either in this birth itself or in eventual future births. The fear of the consequences. These are the motivating factors which drive a person to remain ethical. And it is important for us to tighten. For a man of his own volition who wants to be ethical, it's okay, fine. We respect him, we allow him to remain so. For every other person who is driven by this type of fears, fear of law, that is important for us that we enforce the laws which force a man to remain ethical, little more conscientiously, little more forcefully, little more effectively, to see that those people who are controlled by the fear of law are handled better. Then the fear of social disapproval also, the media has a very important role to play in enforcing this type of social disapproval as a factor for driving a man to become more ethical. The third is fear of God. That is where religion has to play a more effective role. Of late, the culture changes that we have been seeing, the more of the modernity and the cultural behaviors are gradually weaning away people from the real inherent faith of God. And this sort of tendency need to be restrained, at least for the cause of enforcing on people the fear of God and eventual. That's where the faiths like Islamic and Christian faiths, which emphasize on the eventual doomsday and other day of punishment and others, need to be re-emphasized. And at least this particular fear needs to enforce people to become more conscious of their own actions by fear of God. And fear of consequences, the law of karma, there's a corollary. When there's a karma, the faiths, the scriptures very clearly say, when the law of karma operates, the others need not be watching and say, no, he's facing the consequence of his past action, we have no role to play. There's also very simultaneous law of karma when it's operating. There's the law of dharma which is also operating. Every other person who is not a victim of this type of suffering, but who has been endowed by the providence of adequate resources, energy, motivation and thoughts, has to intervene and see that this particular man who is suffering has picked up, and a failure on the part of this particular person who is endowed with the resources and the ability is a matter to be frowned at. It's a matter to be, it's a very important responsibility.
And I'm going to open it up now.
Yeah,
Okay.
so this particular point needs to be also emphasized in some of the nuanced manner. And in terms of sustainability, it's very important that sustainability on spiritualism can come only if we establish such means which eventually take care of harmony in the society in terms of social, religious and economic stability.
Thank you.
So these are the points to be incorporated.
Thank you.
To be added as nuanced points in the drafts.
Thank you very much for
Thank
that.
you.
I'm going to open it up right now, and I've got two people back here and then you. Yakia, you want to go first?
Yeah, I believe that every religious tradition has particular resources that is important and essential in addressing the problems of equality and sustainability. But I'm just wondering how can it work in a practical level? Because not all believers know the theology of equality or the philosophy of equality. What we are discussing today is more a discussion of the elite.
That's right.
So we may reach an agreement on a particular principles or values, but principles and values are still can be interpreted differently by different people.
Well, and they should be. My argument would be one of the reasons to develop principles across religious traditions and across countries and cultures is because it gives us a way to talk to each other in using common denominator, using common principles. We get to those principles perhaps in different ways. If we can agree with those principles, then it helps us talk across our traditions and see common values and common moral commitments. And it also allows us to take those principles back to Indonesia or to India or to China or to the United States or to Europe or wherever, to Africa, and apply those principles in contexts, in specific contexts. And yes, those principles will have different nuances, and some will be more important and some will be less important in different contexts and slightly differently understood.
Yeah,
But yet it develops a common,
But
that would be my argument.
actually what I'm wondering is what kind of spirituality is what developing it is. It is a single religious spirituality that we claims to be able to contribute to the world, for instance, like the salt and light of the world in Christianity. Or what the kind of spirituality that is more popular in the business world, which is the non-religious spirituality. The kind of spirituality that has no reference to any religion. It's based more on reason and experience,
Right.
for instance.
But you see, these principles are also relevant to the business world. And it gives the business world and the religious world, again, a common language.
It's all at the
makes,
third.
it's a way of bridging, it's a way of making religious sensibilities and business sensibilities in conversation with each other.
So and that comes to the third kind of spirituality, which is the interreligious spirituality. And that I think that there are three types of spirituality that is now offered to the business or economic world, which is the single religious like what we are doing today,
Right.
or a non-religious one, or the interreligious spirituality. But what I'm interested in is now is what we are not discussing today is the so-called Islamic economy, which start not only from the principle but from practice.
Right, and we're not, and unfortunately.
Unfortunately, there is no one
Yeah,
here
our
that
Muslim
can
participants
represent the Islamic
I have a very
community.
quick response to
Very quick, because,
non-religious spirituality
uh-huh,
that's prevalent in the business platform, be it in education or in the corporate world. It depends on how the individuals have assimilated and internalized their spiritual movements, whatever the backgrounds may be. That's the first criterion. But when it is transmitted, communication is extremely important because the earlier students are not interested, they will never remember the theories, but they will remember the stories. If you can transmit the stories properly from your tradition without being imposing, then you establish a platform. I'm speaking from 20 years of experience. You establish a platform across regions, across countries, where they take the essence of the stories and they do it in their own way.
thank you, that's great, yeah,
Let me stand up because I'm in the back.
please, then you're next.
I'm a Catholic priest, trained both in Hindu scriptures, I particularly studied Ramayana, later moved on into canteen ethics, and I'm involved in training priests. As I had been listening to these four perspectives, I was just wondering, every time we talk about religion or spirituality, we try to present it in the most ideal form.
That's right.
It is. A religion, a spirituality exists in its most ideal form. But we must not forget the fact that religion over a period of last 5,000 years has not been perfectly successful. And in fact, we need to talk today about the sustainability and spirituality precisely because religions have, I shouldn't say failed, but not succeeded completely. Now, given this situation, probably I would be very happy to listen to these four speakers once again in another round, in offering a self-critique where my religion, my Catholic Church has failed, for example. Because we need to address ourselves. Instead of another critique, a self-critique is most effective. Because if we look at, if we aim at transformation in society, if we are aiming at sustainable society being created, I think a self-critique is the most essential starting step. If time permits, I would be happy to listen to the speakers, but if not, I will leave it to decide.
Right, well, we'll have a few more questions and maybe come back to that, but I really thank you for that because I was thinking the same thing as our speakers were talking, because of course, we talk out of love for our traditions. and tend to emphasize the ideal in our traditions. And I was thinking, well, we've got, you know, billions of, or millions of Buddhists and billions of Christians and billions of, you know, and gee, what's wrong with the world if our traditions are that good, you know? So self-critique is a very critically important thing. And also a very hard thing to do outside of one's circle of comfort. Maybe easier to do when one is alone with Catholics, or one is alone with Buddhists, or, you know, whatever, and harder to do in this kind of context. But a point extremely well taken, very well taken. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Sujit. I'm from Sri Lanka. I'm a Buddhist life coach. My work is mainly with children on ethics education. So I've been involved in training religious leaders on working with children on ethics. And I want to bring the kind of focus onto the children. Because with religion, it is to the child that we teach it. We've been offering religion and our thinking to the child. And over the times, it's the child that's been kind of force-fed certain things. The child has not been given the freedom that it should have as a dignified person to make their own choices in all of our religions. So how do we give that option to the child to ethically reflect? How do we give the capacity for the child in our religion to be an ethical thinker, ethical critical reflector? And I think that's where we need to invest a lot of more resources and time. Not only to teach the dogma, because that's what we normally do, but to teach ethical reflection, how to analyze, how to take the scripture, analyze, how to do that and apply to the current social challenges.
And I would venture to say that each of these traditions has a tradition of self-critique inside of it. And we don't often teach it to the children. But each of these traditions has capacity for self-critique that they too need to learn. That's, you know, thank you very much. You wanted to get in very quickly.
Как мне кажется, основная проблема единства заключается в том,
Speak up.
как сделать так, чтобы все то, что тут обсуждается и говорится о единстве и равенстве, как сделать так, чтобы все то, что здесь обсуждается о единстве и равенстве, исполнялось в мире, что каждый из нас сможет сделать для этого.
How to do so that everything what we speak here is heard outside. The people who are not here, how to make them also understand what we are talking about now.
Ведь все мы
Bring it to them.
все мы и бываем хорошие буддисты, индуисты, христиане до тех пор, как у нас не появится шанс приобрести огромные деньги, миллионы или больше незаконным же путем, который, как правило, используют люди.
We are being a good Christians, good Buddhists and good Hindus till the time we get some chance to get a big amount of money or
There was a greed.
Ведь я знаю людей очень нищих,
he knows very poor people.
но потом они со временем смогли приобрести имущество, хорошую работу,
Later on they could get a good properties and money.
и эти люди стали с презрением относиться к тем же бедным, из которых они вышли.
And now they're not treating well those poor people which they treated well before.
Thank you.
Проблема есть, и как ее решить, тут крайне сложно.
The problem is there, but how to solve it, it's
И выход я вижу лишь один, что каждый священник или духовный лидер будет все больше и больше проповедовать свои общения, идеалы буддизма, индуизма, христианства.
And you know, he sees only one solution in this, so that the priests will speak more to people about this, about the spirituality and the ideal religions.
Thank you. Thank you. It's 10:31. What's your pleasure? Should we break, or should we let this fellow here who really wants to pose a question do it? 3 more minutes? You okay? Please.
I have 2 remarks.
Oh, I thought you were asking a question.
Yeah.
Quickly now.
One is, I think one of the discussions is evolved. There is a common denominator between religious ethics and business ethics.
Uh-huh.
I think as you mentioned. I feel it is not so because the objectives of the 2 phenomena are completely different. Yesterday also we heard very clearly, in the business field their objective is maximizing their wealth and optimizing their resources, where the religious objective is something different. So they feel there is some incompatibility on these 2 areas. Number one. Second is question of indebtedness. I think my Chinese friend was explaining the repayment. Before thinking about repayment, I try to bring out how do we accumulate the earlier wealth? From what source before repaying, how did we accumulate that wealth? Because of inequality, because of different ways, we accumulated. Then you want to repay now to the society. So, unequalness, the origin of unequalness made you to accumulate wealth. Then because of that, now we are trying to distribute to others. These are 2 my observations. But my friend, first friend was telling, we should not use the word beneficiary and benefactor. That is very true. Very, very true. I agree with that. Yesterday also we are told that we have heard the number of companies doing a lot of charity activities now. That charity comes from the heart or simply because of the responsibility. These are the questions raised relating to ethics.
Anybody want to take a...
I speak not so very well English, but I must say, really good companies, that is not the biggest target to make profit. The biggest target is to bring a good service to the customer. And that brings you then really profit. But that is a very important thing. First, to seek to bring the best service to the customer. I'm a businessman. And one other thing, as a businessman, I'm Catholic. But in our business, we work worldwide. I cannot go in my company and say, I'm Christian, I'm now the best, and we make it so. Impossible. The ethic helped me to find a vocabulary that we can speak together worldwide. I cannot speak with the vocabulary from a Catholic. Impossible. But it helps really. Then the other thing is what I make with my profit from my company. Just as also as speak before, I will give back. When I have made a good profit, and we have made the profit while we have given good service to the customer, then I can also give back out to others.
Thank you, very good, and that's a wonderful way to stop. Last word, go ahead. You got the first, you get the last.
Summarizing what you said, I often make this submission. At the end of the day, we cannot afford to preach. We cannot afford to, in a religious environment, we cannot afford to teach. We can only reach. And that's very important.
Thank you very much. A wonderful discussion, wonderful presentations on very complex. This is hard work. This is complex, and thank you all for your contributions. Have a good work.